Okay, so in today's video, what I want to go over is the introductory material, and then also let's go through some trades and triggers. Now, if you don't have this intro information, it includes the guidelines, it includes what the trade setups are, and then it also includes the two different trading plans, one for day trades and then one for swing trades. So if you need a copy of this, let me know. This just talks about, what I'm doing as far as the analysis is concerned. I'm running all possible retracements, extensions, and projections using these ratios, and we're pretty much looking for clusters. Now, as far as the three official trade setups that I run, I don't run the two-step every single day because it doesn't show up every single day. But we're always running Fibonacci price clusters, which is the coincidence of at least three Fibonacci price relationships that comes together within a relatively tight range. We have symmetry setups every single day, and then sometimes we will see a two-step pattern setup. Those are the official setups. Now you can also trade against a single level if you want to write that up in your trading plan. I believe that the higher probability setups are going to be where you have multiple price relationships or where you have symmetry. But there are definitely times where it's going to be well worth it to look at something like a trade against maybe a single 618 or any of the extensions where moves tend to terminate. Okay, so that's just the basics. And then as far as the formula for success, the way that you make money with this work is trade setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. Okay, which includes defining your initial stop placement, deciding how you're going to trail a stop, and also defining how you're going to exit the trade. And sometimes you might just use a trailing stop to exit the trade, and there's nothing wrong with that. So bottom line, when one of these key setup levels are tested and it holds, the next thing that you want to do is go down to a lower time frame chart to look for a trigger. Now, a trigger is going to essentially be a confirmation of a reversal against a trade zone. It tells you that it's worth placing a bet against it. So when this occurs, we enter a trade and define our maximum risk on the cluster just below the low end of it or below the low made prior to the reversal signal. And don't worry if you don't get it just yet, because we will go over some examples. And the other thing that you need to know is that if we have a setup but you don't have a trigger, do not take a trade. Okay. Now you can also find the moving averages that I use on this document. So like I said, if you need it, let me know. And then as far as the day trading plan, the only difference between this day trading plan and the swing trading plan is the time frame trigger. Okay, so for a day trading plan, you can use 1 minute chart, you can use a 377 tick chart, you can use a 5-minute chart. Okay, but for something that you're going to potentially take overnight, and this would be the swing trading plan, would be that you need either a 15-minute chart to trigger an entry or a 30-minute chart. Now the 15-minute chart entry is going to be more aggressive and it will get stopped out more often. So don't really use it unless you are really like a trade. But the 30-minute chart is typically better and it won't get stopped out as much as the 15-minute chart. So again, your choice, but I'd like to see at least a 15 or a 30 trigger to take something overnight. Now the best way to kind of work with this would be, as long as you have the option to day trade, is sneak into a trade using the day trade trigger, and then just don't keep it overnight unless it also triggers for a swing trade, because you're going to get you're going to get triggered on the shorter term triggers a lot closer to where the definition of risk is. And sometimes on the 15 and 30-minute charts, you might not see a trigger until you see a $10 move or even a bigger move than that. I mean, sometimes with the higher price stocks, you might not see something until 60 or 80 bucks. So we're going to go through some of these examples, but let's just go over what the actual triggers are. So we're looking at the day trading plan, and let's see. So for example, a sell trigger for a day trade entry. Now, I like to use the 834 EMA combo. There will be other times that you might want to change that if you do want to be more aggressive. But I want to see the moving average crossover with the 834. And then I also want to see a prior swing low taken out, okay? Because that's basically showing you the shift in pattern. Okay, so once we see both of those, then it's okay to take the trade. And then for a sell setup, you're going to have the definition of risk either above the high made prior to the sell signal or above the high end of the zone. Okay, either one. And then just reverse that for a buy setup. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the examples on recent charts here. Okay, now I know not a lot of you trade Bitcoin, but it is a good one for an example because, you know, we did have a recent setup that played out nicely. And in this example, we're just going to show the swing trade trigger because this was a while ago. I'm not sure that I have the minute charts that will, you know, show me where the day trades triggered to begin with. But note that we had some beautiful symmetry at this 32,903 area. 32,951 was the actual low. We also had timing. And then what would you need to take a trigger? So in this example, I'm going to show you a 30-minute chart trigger. So here, okay. Now there's actually, you know, there's more than one. We had a recent one here after we had a pullback, but let's start with the first one. And it comes in over here when we took, well, here's where you tested some of that key support. You had the moving average crossover to the upside. You had the 8 cross above the 34. And then just make sure that in the process, it also took out a prior swing high. So that was one of your initial triggers. And then recently, when we had a pullback just into, let's say, a 786 retracement and a 50% retracement. But here it is. You ended up holding after the pullback. Here's the 834 EMA crossover. And then when you also took out a prior swing high, and you can actually use this high. I mean, if you want to, this one is a little bit more obvious, but you know, as long as it takes out a prior swing high, I'm okay with that. And also, I usually tell people if you do not know how to find the prior swing high or low, then just start with using the averages, you know, and just look at the crossovers, okay? And there's also going to be times, like I said, if you do want to be a little bit more aggressive or get triggered in closer to where your definition of risk is, if you're okay with that, you can also try the 513. Obviously, you can also try some other triggers on your own. And then one of the things that I started looking at was, well, the Heiken Ashi triggers, and then also what they call the Renko charts. And again, I don't know that much about them, but there are multiple YouTube explanations there. And let's see, let me find my, all right, here it is. All right, this actually isn't it, but if you take, what I like about these particular charts is that it's visual, okay? It's when the color changes that pretty much triggers a trade. Now it does take a while to set up here, but here you go. Okay, so for example, this is one of those Renko charts. So here, well, actually let me show you where we had the support late this afternoon. I know that is not here, but we did have, okay, S&P on the 30-minute chart. Okay, so on the 30-minute chart, we did have support here at, you know, 44.60, 44.63 area. It included symmetry. It included a 786 retracement and a 1272 extension. And then this, again, would be a simple example of a trigger. So once it tested the support, instead of the crossover, you use the color change. And again, I have not tested this for myself yet, but I think it's definitely something worth looking at, especially if you like, you know, the visual change. I mean, it's very clear when it goes back to blue that it's in a buy mode versus the sell mode in red, okay? So that's something else that you may want to consider looking at. But otherwise, the other triggers I've been showing you for, quite some time. Oh, also there's going to be another example of a trigger on this one with the 377 tick chart. Okay, so this is typically faster. In this case, I'm using the 834 EMA crossover. Remember this 44.63 was kind of the top end of the support there. Here's where you made that low. And then where's your trigger? Well, it had the 834 EMA crossover. And then look to the left and see if it already took out a prior swing high. If it didn't, wait for it. So looks like in this case, the first thing we did was have the crossover. The second thing we did was take out this prior swing high. So once that occurred, you can be a buyer and you can place your stop, like I said, either underneath this low or underneath the low end of the zone. Okay, either one is okay. You just have to decide and just write it up in your trading plan. So are there any questions on what I've gone over so far? Yeah, the chart that I'm showing you with the triggers is actually Thinkorswim, because DT does not have any of those crazy bars. It doesn't have the Heiken Ashi. It doesn't have the Renko charts, but Thinkorswim does. Okay, so let's see what else. Let's look for some other examples, and let's see. Well, we can look at an example of a trigger on a 30-minute chart off of this support where we made this low in S&P. So for kicks, let's just call up a 30-minute chart, and it'll show you where it triggers. And like I said, you can still use a 15 if you want to be aggressive. So that's 30. Let's go chart, load template. It's the 834 EMA crossover. All right, here. So the first real trigger here, now here's the moving average crossover. And then you have to look to the left and see, did it take out a prior swing high in the process? Well, it did over here. So this was already taken out, but once this triggered, then that told you that this low may be more important. Now, the problem with some of the 30-minute chart triggers is that once it triggers, it can be so far away from your definition of risk that you have to do one of two things. You can either wait for a pullback, like you did get here, or you can refine an entry after you get this trigger. You can refine an entry on a lower time frame chart. So either one of those things, that's you can look at for those swing trade triggers. Now, let me see what else we have. Oh, here's an example of, remember I was talking about a single level. Okay, so this is the daily chart of Nasdaq cash. Okay, this was a single level, but it was a single level of a major swing where we took this low to this high and extended it, and that was the 1272 extension of a major swing. So it didn't have the other price relationships there to work off of. You just had the one level. So if you've written it up, in your trading plan that it's okay to take, a single level, in some cases you may want to, because this, let me see where it gave you, or what it gave you. From that low to this high, that was a rally of 1471.55 from a single level. Okay, so again, if you just want to trade official setups, that's your choice. But if you want to expand your definitions for trades, that's okay also. Okay, so that's Nasdaq cash daily, and let's actually take a look at the okay, it's NDX, and let's look at the 30-minute. So this was a while ago, so it may not show up. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to show up because it triggered a while back and it's not showing enough of the data for that. So let's go back to some of these other charts and setups that we've had recently. Okay, so what about, well, this again, single level with this pullback in Nasdaq. But what would have told you it was okay to look at a buy entry? Let me go grab this other chart here. All right, that's not working. Okay, NQ. Come on, NQ. Okay, so let's see. Was that the 6143.76? Okay, and for kicks, let's see if the 5-minute chart would have picked it up. Okay, all right, so here, when we had the pullback in Nasdaq back to the area of the 618 retracement, that was right here. Okay, so this is an example of where a 5-minute chart would have triggered. And actually, let's see, it would have been a little bit late. That's why I'm really good with 1-minute charts for day trade decisions. I just don't know that I have enough data to show you where that came in. But here, for example, is where you tested the support. Here's a moving average crossover, and in the process, we did take out a prior swing high, I believe, right over here. All right, let's see what else we have. All right, I know that we had a nice little rally recently in IWM. So let's take a look at that and see if we can find maybe either a 1-minute or 2-minute chart trigger in that case. So when we were pulling back, we had the confluence of a 1272 extension and a 100% projection. Now, as long as it had symmetry, that's considered an official setup because symmetry by itself is a setup. But let's look at where or how this would have triggered maybe on a 1-minute or 2-minute chart. Okay, so this was 19473. Okay, so this is oh, that's a 5-minute chart. Let's see if we can get it down to. Yep, okay. All right, so let's say here's where the support came in. Here is your moving average crossover. And here is the prior swing high we took out. So sometimes you get the crossover first, sometimes you get the crossover second. Okay, but the official trigger is when both of these occur. So if you already took out the prior swing high, what you had to wait for in this case was for the crossover here. Your initial stop would have been placed underneath here or underneath the zone. And again, nice rally off of that. All right, let's see what else we might have in the recent charts. All right, actually, let's get rid of these and switch over. Okay, so do you see the setup in Tesla? This is a daily chart of Tesla. We had a symmetry projection at 946.86. We had a 382 retracement of one of these prior swings. That came in at 950.92. Okay, so that was the setup zone. We rallied straight into it in today's session. I also gave you a chart that showed you that we had time resistance to the rally. So on the daily chart, that was your setup. So let's actually take a look at a 1-minute chart and how that would have triggered an entry for you. So let's go to Tesla. All right, don't need that. Okay, so here's the 1-minute chart. Now you would have had a faster entry if you use the 513, for example, and again, it's going to depend on how aggressive you want to be. But otherwise, here is a prior swing low that we took out. And then here's the moving average crossover. Okay, so you did see a short signal in Tesla. Could have bought some puts, have a stop either above this high or above the high end of this zone. Okay, and then, you know, you want to get to a break-even stop as soon as possible and then trail it down as you go if it really starts moving in your direction. Yeah, symmetry by itself is a setup. So if you have symmetry resistance, like I'm going to show you, well, we have some setups in the after hours in the S&P and Nasdaq. So you can take a trade against a single level of symmetry there. All right, let's see what else we have. Okay, well, here was another, this was, you know, an older setup. This was on a daily chart in Apple. The setup was a cluster of 3 price relationships. We had a 786 retracement, a 618 retracement, and a 100% projection of one of these prior swings. Okay, so it hit and it held. Not only did we have the price work come together, we also had timing for a low at the same time. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Now, I'm not sure if I'd be able to see like an early entry with a 5-minute chart, but let's take a peek. Yeah, not a 1-minute chart. Let's try a 5-minute. Nah, I don't think that's going to work. 15. All right, I don't have enough back data on this chart, so let me just create it in DT. Okay, so here we've got Apple. Okay, so, you know, we talked about kind of sneaking in to a swing trade by first using a day trade trigger. Okay, we're going to do the 834 EMA crossover. This is a 5-minute chart. You can say, well, once it took out a prior swing high and then also had the crossover, you could be a buyer. You know, you can buy options if you want, or, you know, buy the stock outright. And then again, either place the stop below this low or place it below the low end of the support, which would have been underneath 154.06. Okay, so far that's rallied 21 bucks and change off of that simple setup where you didn't have to risk much at all because we did continue to hold above that support. All right, so that's another example in Apple. Let's see what else I have. Well, you could have used, for example, we did have resistance in Apple today on the 30-minute chart. Note that we had a crossover to the downside and we took out a prior swing low there. So when that occurs, you know, that's basically a shift in pattern, a shift in trend. You always want to watch the next pullback for a possible failure. Now, the area that stood out was the area of the 618 retracement, and 100% of this prior swing gave you this 174.12 to 61 area as resistance. And then let's see if I can find it here on a 1-minute chart. Yeah, okay. So here is where we tested the resistance. Here is the 834 EMA crossover. Here is a prior swing low that it took out. Okay, so once that occurred, could have gotten short Apple, placed the stop above that high or above the high end of the zone, which would have been above 174.61. And let's see. Anything else? And you know, we're talking about Facebook timing for a possible low, but guess what? There's absolutely no buy trigger on the 30-minute chart. So remember, setup minus trigger, no trade. All right, how about, okay, don't really have anything there. We'll have something to look at in Google tomorrow. That's a setup on the 30-minute chart, but it is counter trend because of where the averages are at. And let's take a look at, okay, we already did Tesla there. We're also going to have, some setups in Tesla on the buy side tomorrow. But remember, just wait for a trigger. If you don't see one, leave it alone, because do not be surprised if we continue to decline from the daily resistance instead. Okay, but just take it from one decision to the next. The last decision was the resistance that shows up both here and on the daily chart. Your next decision is whether or not this support holds and the rally resumes, or are we going to continue to decline from this decision? All right, let's see. What else do we have? Well, we did have a setup. I think this was, okay, this was the 7th, where we hit and held symmetry support. But let's see if I can find a trigger. Possibly on a 1-minute chart. Okay, so that support, when it tested it, okay, 90.73, that was the low. Okay, so here's the support, here's the crossover, and it also took out this prior swing high. Okay, so again, once those things occurred, you could be a buyer, and if you want to give it a little bit of room, you can trade options. That kind of makes it a little bit easier to deal with. And then let's see, initial stop will be underneath this low or underneath the low end of the zone. Okay, now it didn't make the full target, but you did eventually see a rally of $1.64, which is not peanuts in crude oil. All right, so it looks like that's it for those. Let me just see if I have anything else. And then we'll go over any questions you may have. And actually, this is kind of interesting with what we're up against as far as really important resistance in Bitcoin, this 44,286 to 44,785. This is a sell decision. Okay, but it's really not going to trigger on a 30-minute chart for quite some time. So remember, just because you see the resistance, don't assume that it's going to roll over. Wait for a signal that tells you that it's worth placing a bet. And I think beyond that, yeah, I'm not really sure what this Ethereum data will look like, but on the shorter term charts, but let's check it. Let's see if we can get a 15-minute. Okay, so this would have also been for a swing trade. Use the 834 EMA. Okay, let me make sure. Nope, I don't think this is showing all the data, so let's try the 30 instead. Okay, here it is. So let's do it again. Chart, load template, 834. Okay, this one took a while. Here you had the 834 EMA crossover, and then it looks like here before that you took out a prior swing high. So once both occurred, you could look at the buy side and again have the stop underneath here. Now, did it come back and pull back near here? Yeah, but it didn't take out this low, so you wouldn't be stopped out. Okay, so I'm thinking that that's enough as far as examples for you. Do you guys have any questions that you want to ask? Or do you basically have it nailed down? I mean, 1 minute charts, 2 minute charts, 5 minute charts for day trades. I like the 377 tick for stock index futures. Okay, it doesn't look like... Okay, so as far as trailing stops, we'll take a look at one of those examples, and I need to go back to the other workspace. I would rather trail up a stop than necessarily, just book profits because you get to an extension, because you can get to a 1272 extension, book your profits, and then it goes to 2618, and then you're really pissed off at yourself. I would rather let the market take me out, but again, that's just a suggestion. But let's take a look at this IWM. Okay, so this was a 30-minute setup. So let's say you took a buy off of this 30-minute setup. You can use the same chart if you like, because in this case it kind of gives you a prior swing low to trail something under, and that would be this low here. And let me just show you where it comes in. $197.99. So you could use that for a stop, or if you wanted to go to a lower time frame chart for an even tighter fit, well, let me just take a look at the 5-minute chart and see if it makes any sense. Actually, I think it's, oh wait, let's see, the 5-minute comes in here. 31.13. Oh, sorry, that is the wrong chart. We want IWM. Yeah, I think it's going to pretty much be the same. You can have a stop underneath here. But let's say when it was trading straight up over here, could you have had an even tighter stop? Yeah. You can consider this a prior swing low, and we could have had a stop right underneath here. So the question that you have to always ask yourself is, how much am I willing to sit through as far as a pullback is concerned to try and stay in for better prices? And that's something, again, you have to decide how much you're willing to sit through. Yeah, I will do another video on trailing stops, but I just wanted to get through, the basics of the triggers and, the introductory, oh, I see, I just got news, I didn't have that. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording here.